My name is Danielle Beach Oswald, and I'm here today with Patricia Wunder, and we are going to talk about the advantages and the differences between EB1As, which are extraordinary ability, and EB2's national interest waivers. Each of these categories have 140,000 visas. Both of these categories are widely used at our law firm. So, Patricia, why do we do EB1As as opposed to EB2's national interest waivers?
EB1s, as you said, are for extraordinary ability aliens, and typically that requires 3 of 10 criteria to be satisfied, even though in practical standpoint we always try and satisfy more than 3 of 10. This is typically for an individual who has received a national international award. They're a membership in an association that demands outstanding achievement of their members. They've been published in a professional or major trade publication. They've been asked to judge the work of others. There's major media or press written about them. And also they have original scientific, scholarly, artistic, or business-related contributions. Typically, we would use this category instead of the second preference national interest waiver for a few reasons. One, because it's a higher preference category, which means that it's a higher standard to meet. However, less people meet the standard. So typically you can get your green card faster because the visa numbers are not used as much as the second preference category is utilized. Additionally, even though it's a higher preference category or a higher standard, you don't have to show that the work that the person is doing is in the national interest, which you have to show for the second preference national interest waiver category. And that's actually a really hard standard to meet. Not every job that someone does is in the national interest of the United States. So that's typically why you would always see if the individual meets the EB1 category first.
So an EB1, that person would be highly qualified, but they might not necessarily be doing work that is going to be in the national interest for the U.S. So let's talk a little bit about how the 3 criteria out of the 10 are different for an EB2 than for an EB1.
So for the second preference for national interest waiver, what's different than the first preference is that you would show exceptional ability instead of extraordinary, which is the higher standard for EB1. For exceptional, again, you have to show 3 of 10, and we would always try to satisfy more than 3 of 10. You would need to show that the individual has a degree in their profession, so it doesn't have to be an advanced degree. You would want to show that they're a membership in association. What's different for the standard than for an EB1 is that it doesn't have to be an association that requires merit or distinction of the member. It can be any professional association, so even associations that you pay to be a member. You could also show 10 years of experience in your field. That would be post-bachelor's degree. You could show a license to practice in your profession or certificates to show that you've had some type of training in the profession. Also that you've commanded a high salary. That's similar to the first preference also. You would also show the general category of evidence showing eligibility, which would include recommendation letters. That would be for the first preference category as well.
Now, if we're talking about EB1s versus an EB2 national interest waiver, clients coming in aren't going to know which one they fit into. So could you give us some examples of what types of positions we've done that are EB1s?
Sure. So for an example, for a previous EB1 that we've done, we had an individual who was developing a technology that was developed and utilized in a country outside the U.S. And he was working on the technology in the U.S. and he was promoting the technology in the U.S., but this technology was not going to benefit the U.S. at all. It was very specific to a country that was not the United States. But he had been published for his work in professional journals. There was a lot of press about this technology, and he has been asked to speak at conferences. So he was clearly someone who had
an expertise in that area.
Yes, but his work was clearly not in the national interest of the U.S. So that was clearly a first preference category.
So someone who, for example, has done some patents, could they be either one?
And, that's really, patents are, it's really an interesting when it comes to EB1s versus EB2s, because for the individual I just talked about, the technology he had was patented, but it was not in the national interest of the U.S. But then we have another client who has a patent in the U.S., and the technology actually assists with people's lives, being able to get help they need when they're in danger or they're hurt. So we can show a correlation between this technology and improving the lives of people in the U.S. So that would be in the interest of the United States. So that would qualify under the national interest waiver.
And we've done a number of EB2's national interests. We like those.
We have.
And could you tell us some of those areas that are so very, very different, going from refugee status to sports to other things? Give us a few cameos of those kind of cases that we've done that have been successful.
Sure. So I think the national interest waiver category is really interesting. I think a lot of people are frightened of doing national interest waivers because they think the standard is really hard to meet, and it is. But I think if you're able to show the correlation between the work and how it's going to affect the United States, especially the security of the United States, and the national security of the U.S. is not just what you initially think of as far as our physical safety, but it also can be our food security, food safety. It could be the health of individuals in the U.S. There is a focus in the national interest waiver category on children. So we've done some national interest waivers for people who do work in, let's say, Africa. So they work in food security in Africa, global health in Africa, such as AIDS or different other illnesses.
Preventing terrorism.
Yes. And then we're able to show that by assisting people globally in things such as food security and illness prevention actually helps the United States, because we in everyday lives deal with people from all over the world, and it's also in the interest of the United States to help in those areas. And the United States actually spends a lot of money providing aid in different countries abroad. So we're able to show that while the work is actually in Africa, that it's being funded and it's in the interest of the United States. So we've done cases like that. We've also worked on cases dealing with security and terrorism. So if someone's doing work in a war-torn country or
such as
Syria, working in a case for someone who does work in Syria, we've worked on a case for someone who does work in Yemen. We're able to show that the United States has a significant interest in providing humanitarian aid to countries in the Middle East. And the work that individual doing is in direct national interest of the United States.
And these cases are not only interesting, but they really are a lot of research, aren't they?
Yes. So we have to show a few things. So you have to show the individual's work has substantial intrinsic merit. So their work is we can just say it's generally really important. Then we also have to show it's in the national interest. So the research that we do, and we do lots of research, we do background research on the actual work. So to understand the meat of what the person's doing, so we can explain that to immigration, because, immigration doesn't know everything about every job. And then we also research statistics and facts about how this work actually helps the U.S. So we quantify the work. So how many people have been affected? What types of people? How much money has been spent by the U.S. government? And then we also show reports that are actually distributed by the U.S. government, by different agencies like the Department of State, the White House, Congress, different U.S. federal agencies to explain why the work is so important. So there has to be a lot of objective evidence to correlate and verify the individual's unique work.
Now, an EB-1A would take generally less time because you can premium process, whereas you can't premium process the EB-2.
Well, the national interest waiver, the
national
EB-2.
interest waiver.
Yes.
Sometimes a person that might meet both criteria. So how would you determine when they meet both which way you're going to go? We would always usually do the EB-1 in that case because of the processing time.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, you would always prefer, I mean, there are 5 preference categories in employment-based. The first is always the best because of the processing time. But, you know, if the person doesn't meet the first category, then you would try for the second.
Thank you. We look forward to working with you if you're interested in doing either one of these two. We enjoy doing them. We enjoy working with people from many different countries to do these.